Good evening and welcome. Good evening.
Good evening.
I'm Bob Dillinger with the League of Women Voters, your moderator for this evening's debate. The League is a nonpartisan political organization for women and men that encourages informed and active participation in government. Tonight you'll be learning more about the candidates to help you, the citizen, make a more informed decision at the polls. Before introducing the candidates, I'll provide some information about the city and go over some of the rules and the format for tonight's forum, which the candidates have received ahead of time. I'll also have some instructions for you in the audience. Voter registration for the August 27th primary election closed on July 29th, meaning it's done. The city of St. Pete has chosen not to conduct early voting. Mail ballots are available as in the previous elections. In the primary, voters citywide may cast their votes in the mayoral race. However, only voters in districts 4, 6, and 8 can vote in their respective council district races. All voters in the primary will also be voting on a referendum question regarding the LINs. For the mayoral as well as each of the council races, the names of the two candidates receiving the most votes will be placed on the November 5th general election ballot to be voted at large. These elections are nonpartisan. The city of St. Petersburg is the fourth largest city in Florida with a population of over 247,000 people in 2011. It operates under the strong mayor form of government with an elected city council. The mayor is responsible for running the daily affairs of the city, receives an annual salary of $158,355, and serves 4-year terms of office limited to 2 consecutive terms. And now, moving on to the format and the rules for tonight's forum. 1 minute will be allowed for replies to audience-written questions that I will pose to the candidates. If a question is directed to a single candidate, others may be allowed a 30-second response if they so choose. There will be no opening remarks. 1.5 minutes will be allowed for closing remarks. Candidates have drawn for their order of seating. Timekeepers are Jim Jackson and Sharon Jackson. The views expressed by the candidates do not represent those of the League or this forum sponsoring organization. We ask that you hold your applause until after the closing statements. Audio and videotaping needs prior approval. Please submit your written questions. If you have questions, raise your hand and the League person will come and take care of that. Not all questions get asked. We hope that they all will. We hope to do 15 to 20 at least tonight. We're always sorry when we're unable to ask questions, but we're gratified by the strong level of your civic engagement on this part. I want to thank the colleagues, Mary Berglund, Karen Knopf, Wendy Grassi, Karen Reese, Terry Bryant, and Carolyn Bloodworth, who are assisting reviewing the questions tonight. Your presence here as candidates and members of the audience show that you share the League's goal to become more informed and active in this political process. As you can see here today, men make vital contributions as member of the League and have since 1974. I'm a long-term member of the League. We invite you to join us in the work that we do. Why not sign up today? If you'd like to talk to Nancy Tate in the back, she'll be happy to sign you up. And now, the candidates running for mayor in the city of St. Petersburg primary election. Would you all like to introduce yourself, please?
Yes,
I'm Anthony Cates.
I'm Bill Foster, and I am your mayor.
Kathleen Ford.
I'm Rick Kreisman.
We will now go to the first question. If elected, and this is to all the candidates, if elected, what are the 2 most important actions that you would take in your first year in office?
2 most important actions I would take when I am elected mayor of St. Petersburg, Florida, one would be to tackle our budget. In order for us to succeed as a great city, we must be fiscally conservative. That's the approach that I would take. Also, education. Education is the core of every issue that we face as a city. And with these 2 issues tackled, we will prosper.
I'm going to keep doing what I've been doing for the past 3 years. Economic development and job creation is certainly the #1 goal of this administration. Going through the worst recession in our lifetimes, we created environments that would allow private investment, that would really posture the city to be engaged in the end of that recession. We're on track for $500 million of new growth, new construction in the city in FY13. We're going to continue to create these environments, this partnership that we've created with the St. Pete Chamber, Eckerd College, St. Pete College, USF St. Pete, and something called the Greenhouse. It's all things about businesses, job creation, economic development, creating entrepreneurs in the city. And then certainly the second thing will be education. I just announced an initiative called St. Pete Promise, which literally ties in Pinellas County School System with Pinellas Education Foundation, looking at new initiatives for those who are vocational bound or college bound to decrease that achievement gap.
Candidate 4.
Thank you. Can everybody hear me? I think the first thing we need to do is look at our budget, make sure that our budget aligns with our goals here in the city of St. Petersburg. And there are some issues I've noticed that we have to address, and it has to do with our commitment to our entire city. And I think when we look at our budget, we have to make sure that it reflects our values in our community. And there's been some significant slippage in our commitment to our neighborhoods. And I know, being a past neighborhood association president, like Scott and many of you, that it's really important that we address the major portion of our city boundaries, and that is our neighborhoods. And we have to look at coordinating our essential city services like law enforcement. I think we need to return to community policing. We have to make sure that we're looking at codes compliance. We need to make sure that we are really coordinating all of those services in a fiscally responsible manner. Secondly, I think we need to look at how our law enforcement is interfacing with our city, because I think it's critical that we have the resources needed to address everybody's safety concerns.
Candidate Christ.
Thank you. One of the things I want to focus in on is education. I was very disturbed and not surprised, unfortunately, to read the report over the weekend from the Tampa Bay Times regarding the schools in St. Petersburg and how our schools are failing comparatively speaking to other schools in Pinellas County. And it's my goal for our schools not only to be the best in the county, but to have a reputation nationally as some of the best schools in the nation. If we don't have good schools, your kids and grandchildren aren't going to have a future that they can be assured of getting a job, because they're not going to have an educated workforce. And if we want to have economic development, which is the second thing that we need to focus on so we can bring jobs to this area, we've got to have good schools. So education's one. The second thing is jobs. We need to refocus our efforts on bringing jobs and working with USF and Marine Sciences, working with All Children's and Johns Hopkins and Health Sciences, and also looking at the Dome Industrial area as an area where we can bring new jobs and green jobs in battery technology and LED technology.
Next question, and just to clarify, under league rules, we address everyone as a candidate. Candidate Foster, that you would have go first on this. What can you do as mayor to help the homeless return to more productive lives?
Wow. Coming from you, Mr. Dillinger, that's an honor. And Mr. Dillinger didn't properly introduce himself. He is the public defender for the 6th Judicial Circuit. And it was Mr. Dillinger and Bernie McCabe, the state attorney, and the chief judge, with Sheriff at that time Jim Coates, now Bob Galtieri, that we all sat down together at the courthouse and developed a process called the Safe Harbor. We created bed spaces knowing that as a county we were committed to the compassionate care of our homeless. And as we go forward, I'm going to continue to work with Mr. Dillinger and Mr. McCabe and the sheriff and the court systems to make sure that the Pinellas Safe Harbor is the correct alternative for the chronic care of our homeless. We're also going to make sure that we continue to work with our other social service agencies, giving people incentives as a portal to go into self-sufficiency. That's that's vocational training, that's VA benefits, and all of the things that they're entitled to under proper case management. We're going to continue to do that.
Thank you. And I applaud the efforts that Mr. Foster has taken on in helping our homeless with Safe Harbor. I started the city's homeless task force back in the late 90s, and we started looking at who are our homeless. And as many of you all know, there are several categories. We have folks who have mental health problems, and when the state closed all the mental health hospitals, a lot of those folks then were out on the street. So that's a component that I'm not sure that education will help. I think we have to look at more compassionate care for those folks. Then we have, of course, our returning veterans. And although our Bay Pines and Mount Haley have different programs for helping homeless, we still have some homeless vets, and that's something we have to address. They sacrifice for us, we need to look out for them. I think we have to look at making sure that we have affordable housing so that we prevent people from becoming homeless. That is a problem also. Education and training, obviously, are programs that are offered at the state and federal level that we have to look at so that we can help folks return to productive life.
Thank you. And it's really kind of fitting that this question followed the first one, because in the first question I talked about education and jobs. And when we're talking about the homeless, part of what we need to do is to have more jobs available so that people can have a job and they don't find themselves in a position where they're homeless. But we also do have to focus on mental health counseling and substance abuse counseling, and a lot of the issues in our ability to do that successfully deals with funding. And that's one thing that's been disappointing. We haven't done, the administration hasn't done as good a job at reaching outside our borders and bringing funding back into this community so that we could pay for more mental health counseling, we could pay for more substance abuse counseling, and provide the beds that we need to so that people have a place to go. So those are some of the things that we need to, but this is an incredibly challenging issue.
I do agree with Rick Kreisman. This is a challenging issue that we face as a city. We do need to not only find a centralized location on where we would house the homeless, we also have to enable them with an education as well to be brought back into society to where they would become self-sustaining citizens. I do applaud Mayor Foster with Safe Harbor. I will expand that in those efforts, but the core issue, once again, is educating everyone. And I will also, we have to combat our children aging out of the foster systems. We have to find a place for them, get them into job trainings, education once again.
Candidate Ford, what do you feel is the proper role of the neighborhood associations?
Well, I think the neighborhood associations are partners with the city, and it's been gratifying for me to be a neighborhood association president. That's how I got involved in local politics, because I know when we work together and divide up the problems throughout the city, using the structure of our neighborhood associations, we are able to quickly identify the problems, come up with the solutions, and then work towards implementing them. Unfortunately, under the past two administrations, we've seen our commitment to our neighborhoods really, really slip. That doesn't mean that any citizen can't call the mayor's action line and ask for assistance. That's always going to be there, I think, because we understand that some folks fall outside of or can't get to a neighborhood association meeting. But I think neighborhood associations are a wonderful way of getting folks together to consensus build on what the issues are and how to address them. And it's nice to see that the Northeast Park Neighborhood Association is coming back, and it was a contentious issue that kind of divided this neighborhood, and I know Leslie's going to work hard to bring Northeast Park back.
Thank you. You know, there was a time back when I was on city council, we used to have more than 120 neighborhood associations, and our neighborhoods were thriving and they were vibrant. And the focus, unfortunately, in this administration has not been the same on neighborhoods. We don't have someone in administration whose sole focus is on neighborhood associations as we used to have. We don't have the neighborhood partnership grant program like we used to have. Code enforcement has been reduced, the budget has been reduced, and the efficiency and effectiveness of codes is diminished. And that's a shame, because when you have strong neighborhoods, you become a more attractive place for businesses when they know they have a place that people can live, that provides a good quality of life. We've got to get back to having those vibrant neighborhoods that we used to have, and providing the programs, the grant assistance to allow neighborhoods to flourish so that the community has the opportunity to speak as one. And it's not just individual neighbors, but it's the entire community speaking as one.
Candidate Kate.
Speaking as one is something we must do. For us to succeed as a city, we have to be united as a people. We really do need to expand our neighborhood associations. The way that I feel that we should do that is information about these topics. They have to be accessible. I've talked to many citizens and they don't know what a neighborhood association is. They don't know how they can get involved in their neighborhood. These types of things we have to educate the people on. They have to be more accessible to the citizens, since we do make up the city. Also, once we do have to educate the people on that and pretty much get everybody involved in what goes on in the city, since we are, like I said, we make up the city.
Candidate Foster.
I love neighborhood associations, and Northeast Park is an old one that I used to work with, not only on the city council, but as mayor. I see your past president, Cheryl, over there, and Scott. Neighborhood associations rock. They are your liaison to city halls. Now, you don't have to have a neighborhood association to get great quality customer service if you have a need. But neighborhood associations are great liaisons. It's not about whether or not you can receive a grant. It's about neighbors coming with commonality. It's about relationship building, and it's about having that association for public engagement with the mayor's office, with the city council. And we still have a great neighborhoods department. It's called the Community Services Department. But we're there to help you with a plan. We're there to issue any mailers that you have, to help you with your websites. We're there to take care of the overall needs of the neighborhood. We are built on neighborhood associations. We have many great ones. It's about knowing your neighbor. It's about Crime Watch. It's about engagement. So thank you to Northeast Park.
Candidate Kreisel. What can you do as mayor to help all those homeowners who are facing foreclosure?
The foreclosure registry was certainly important, and it was a good step that the city did. But one of the things that we've seen happen across the Bay in Tampa is where the mayor went to Washington and brought money back for affordable housing programs and for financial assistance programs. And that's one of the things that's been very disappointing to me, again, in this administration, is we haven't seen that willingness to reach outside the borders of this community to try and bring assistance back to this community and to create programs to help people not only maintain and stay in their homes, but to address some of the other issues we have when it comes to affordable housing, where we have a glut of two-bedroom, one-bath houses, and families can't find homes that they can afford to buy. So I think we've got to look at it comprehensively, but we've got to also get the funding necessary to provide that assistance.
Candidate Cates. I'm sorry, I'm wrong. Candidate Ford.
I've actually handled a foreclosure before on both sides. Somebody who was owed money, had a mortgage, was secured by the property. In order to get the loan satisfied somewhat, we had to foreclose on the property. Part of the issue that I think makes it so difficult, or for so many of those folks who are facing foreclosure, are as a result of what went on Wall Street. And I don't think too big to fail has been fixed yet. We saw an incredible devaluation of property. What I think as mayor that I could do to help folks facing foreclosure is to make sure that we are making the changes to legislation to prevent what happened up at Wall Street from happening again, and that would take advocacy as a mayor of a fourth largest city. Secondly, I think we can educate folks that you've got to tend to those issues related to credit and make sure that you can qualify. And I would certainly advise folks to talk to their lenders early and often. And of course, I still think there's a problem in our court system because for some reason there was a lot of robo-signing, and that really contributed to a huge problem where homeowners were innocent. And that's something that we still have to address in our bond. And I'm saying this to all the attorneys who are up here.
Candidate Foster.
Well, there's not a thing any American mayor could have done to prevent the mortgage foreclosure crisis. That was unscrupulous banking practices that really preyed on the public when the housing market was good. But what I did is I worked with the Florida Urban Partnership because our Attorney General, Pam Bondi, created a settlement fund of hundreds of millions of dollars that went not only to the victims of the unscrupulous banking practices, but some of that money was set aside for affordable housing, for blight removal, and it was actually the city of St. Petersburg and myself and my administration that really wrote the plan that the state adopted as far as to how these funds should be distributed statewide. And so I was involved in Tallahassee as far as going to Washington to seek neighborhood stabilization funds, NSP 3. We actually did that in this administration. So we couldn't have prevented it, but it is counseling, it's credit counseling, it's counseling for those that are becoming new mortgagors to make sure that they don't become prey again.
Candidate Gates.
What I would do is simply try to help the citizens, of course, by implementing a program to where that we could educate our first-time home buyers. I would fight to get government grants to, in rare cases, to help our citizens save their homes to the ones that want to be saved early on, versus it being 3 years out, 3 or 4 years out. I would also try to help them, but we would want to try to combat this issue early on into the stages before their home is actually foreclosed on. We have to create jobs, careers preferably of my choice, so that these homeowners would have stable and job security so that they can afford these homes. Of course, things as far as credit counseling, things like that, that is important as well. But I will definitely try my hardest to fight every issue that we face as a city and help as many citizens as possible.
Candidate Gates, will you sign the Mayors Against Illegal Guns if elected?
Yes, I can't say that I'm for guns. I don't. We don't need, only people to me that need guns or weapons, period, is the ones that protect us, such as our police officers. To me, those are the only ones that need guns. Illegal guns I am against. It's not in my power to overthrow gun laws, not yet anyway. But however, I will sign and ban all illegal guns. We actually need a date to where that we could set up in the communities to where that citizens can bring illegal guns without any sanctions brought against them or any type of criminal acts brought against them, so that we can take the guns out of our neighborhoods.
Candidate Foster.
Let me make it clear, I am a mayor against illegal guns. I don't think guns should be in the possession of felons or in the hands of those who are mentally ill. I will not sign up for the Mayor Bloomberg's Mayors Against Illegal Guns, because it's more than just about guns. And it's an agenda that once the agenda is set, you have no control over the agenda, and once the agenda changes, you're stuck. For that same reason, my friend across the bay, Mayor Bob Buckhorn, has not and will not subscribe to Mayors Against Illegal Guns. It doesn't mean we're for illegal guns. It strictly means we're not going to stick with the agenda of that organization. So we've been very clear. We've had a gun bounty program. We've removed dozens and dozens of illegal guns from the city of St. Petersburg. We're going to continue to do that.
Candidate Ford.
I am against illegal guns. I don't think felons nor those who have mental health problems should have them. That being said, I share Mr. Foster's concerns about Mayor Bloomberg's Mayors Against Illegal Guns. Many of you all probably know that there's a shortage of ammunition right now, and I wonder where is all the ammunition, because we don't have enough practice rounds for our officers. I think we need to utilize the services of alcohol, tobacco, and firearms in order to get more of the illegal guns off the street. And we've had some remarkable success in partnership, and I applaud Mr. Foster and the police department for their efforts together to get some of those guns off the street. We simply have to do more, because it isn't the same. Not every neighborhood is a safe neighborhood, and that's not fair in the city of St. Pete. So we have to work harder to remove those illegal guns off the street so that all neighborhoods are safe neighborhoods.
Candidate Chrysler.
Thank you. First off, let me say that I support the Second Amendment right of people to own a gun. But having said that, I would not hesitate to sign the Bloomberg petition against illegal guns. I think it's important that the leader of the city send a very clear message. Even though we can't as a community pass any legislation or any ordinances that in any way attack the ability of someone to own a weapon illegally, we do need to send a message to the community that this is something that's not acceptable, it's not going to be tolerated, and as the mayor of the city, that you are the strongest voice, that I would be the strongest voice against illegal weapons in our community, and I would have no problem signing on with that.
Candidate Foster, what do you see as the greatest challenge faced by South St. Pete, and what is your plan for addressing it?
I think it's economic development, and certainly the mortgage foreclosure crisis had a great deal to do with the concentration of life. I have reviewed the county's study on the impacts of poverty countywide, but when you look at the concentration in South St. Petersburg, it is overwhelming. And I think having a 45,000 square foot college in the St. Pete College, the new campus, I think as you re-energize the Manhattan Casino with Sylvia's of Harlem, I think as we invite people to come and build on the Job Corps site to create real jobs, I think will have a good impact. I think bringing a grocery store back, and I'm hopeful that we'll have an announcement very soon along 22nd Street. I think focusing on housing, blight removal, all of these things will have an impact. And really, that community redevelopment area that we're creating with the county, a joint CRA that will bring in not only tax increment financing, but give us the ability for grants, will turn South St. Petersburg around.
Candidate Ford.
I think the greatest challenge facing South St. Petersburg is an educational one. I think most folks have read the recent data, and it's not good. And the reason it's not good is that does not mean a really good future for folks who do not know how to read, who cannot pass basic math and reading. And that's where I think the city of St. Petersburg can really play a pivotal role in helping children to learn, and that is by looking at early child learning. I think it's just terrible that the county returned $2.4 million of funds that could have been available for early childhood learning. And that's going to be critical to making sure that our children are ready to go to elementary school. Right now, too many of our children are not ready to go. And once they get to school, they're already behind. And they know it when they're behind. And that's where I think the city actually can take a more active role in making sure that we have pre-K available so that all children can be successful. That's the key to success.
I think the biggest challenge facing South St. Petersburg is perception. And when I'm talking about perception, it's been historic in the city that Central Avenue is a dividing line. And if you live to the north of Central Avenue, you don't cross south of Central Avenue because there's a perception that it's dangerous. There's a perception that there's no jobs. There's a perception that neighborhoods are run down. And we've got to change that. If we're going to be able to bring jobs to South St. Petersburg and economic development, we've got to change the perception that people have. If businesses don't feel safe, if they don't think there are good schools, they're not going to locate in South St. Petersburg. And I think that's the biggest challenge that we have, is to change the perception and change race relations.
Candidate Tate.
I'm 23 years old. For 20 years of my life, I lived in Southside St. Petersburg. And a major issue that we face is economic development. And President Harry Truman said it best in his 1949 inaugural speech. In referring to the citizens, and what he said was their economic life is stagnant and primitive. Their poverty is a threat both to them and to more prosperous areas. And what that statement meant a lot and said a lot to me. We as a city, we must work hand in hand with everyone. We must not create jobs. I don't want to say create jobs, but create career opportunities. Education, that's another big issue. If the people aren't educated, how could they ever like or want new things or keep the upkeep of what was there for them? So economic development and education are the two main things that Southside St. Pete faces.
Candidate Ford. The schools in St. Pete are falling far short of an acceptable level of success. What are your plans for ensuring that the students in St. Pete get a quality education?
I have two children who graduated from high school here in St. Petersburg, and I know the challenges that public teachers, public education, public school teachers face with the student population that comes through. Poverty is such a huge issue for so many of our students who are on reduced or free lunch. And the city, I think, has an obligation to work closely with our public schools, the superintendent of schools, and I applaud Mr. Foster in finally taking that step and working towards identifying some of those issues. I think it takes more than just giving a little apple to good teachers every year. I think it really takes some concentration and looking at other schools. For example, there are some in New Jersey that have had some success with a similar type population where the kids succeed. We know these children have certain challenges. We know it, so let's just deal with it and make sure that every child can succeed. Again, I think early child education is the key, and the city can do something about that.
Candidate Christ.
You know, when Mayor Baker was mayor, he really did some innovative things when it came to public school education, creating the Mayor's Mentors More program and partnering businesses with each local school so that there was additional revenues to go into that school so teachers weren't having to reach into their own pockets. I'm glad that we're 3.5 years in, but I'm glad that Mayor Foster is now supporting those programs. We need to take those programs and not only support them, but we need to increase them. But we can't just stop there. We've got to look for additional ways. One of the things that I've been talking a lot about is service learning and integrating service learning into each of our schools here in St. Petersburg. Service learning takes community service and integrates it into the curriculum. And what we find is students who are engaged in community service do better in school. Their behavioral problems go down, graduation rates go up, and their grades go up. It changes the whole environment in the classroom. And when you look at it holistically, that's where you can make the difference. That's where we can improve schools, and we've got to do that.
Candidate Case.
Well, all of us, we would stand in the same place as far as education. That is the forefront of all of our core issues. We do have to start at an early age in getting the children more involved in what's going on, and we can't just stop there. We have to find a way to send a message to the children's homes as well, to get the parents more involved in their children's educational process. We have to somehow implement programs to where that the children and parents could maybe once a week come to the schoolhouses, volunteer, and be a part of their child's education. Because this is important, especially at a young age. This is where we pretty much learn everything, and we have to educate and we have to sustain these processes and issues. They have to be sustained throughout their K through 12 career, and also to higher learning educations, it has to be sustained.
Candidate Foster.
Well, Mr. Kreisman, what would have you believe that the apple just hit me on the head and I just decided to do something about education? First of all, I'm not the superintendent of schools, nor are we the school board, but it's about relationships, it's about partnerships. And I took Mayor Baker's initiatives regarding Mayor's Mentors and More doorway scholarships, corporate partners in schools, and continued along that vein to make sure that we gave children hope and sent them to college with a promise of a 4-year education. We have a 93% graduation rate. But I also recognize that we still have failing schools. So it is about early childhood education, and this thing that we're doing now called Summer Bridge, so we don't lose kids as they transition from one grade to the next and lose some of their skills during the summer months. It's opening up a new charter school in Midtown, which we're about to do. It's partnerships with JWB and the school system. I've had 3 superintendents of schools since I've been mayor for 3.5 years. Dr. Michael Gregel is committed to the education of your kids. We're going to continue with this partnership as we go forward to decrease that achievement gap.
Kreisman, question. How can code enforcement be responsive to neighbors and neighborhood disputes?
The entire time I was on city council for the 6 years I served, code enforcement was always something I was extremely interested in. I'm a big believer that in the broken window theory, where if you allow homes to fester, to not be kept up, that it spreads and it goes throughout the entire neighborhood and eventually takes it over. So to me, code enforcement and having sufficient number of code enforcement officers equipping them with the technology so they can become more efficient is really critical. And the city has cut codes by more than 25% in the last several years. I think that's a problem. I also think there are ways that we can make codes function more efficiently so that they are more responsive. And I want them to be held more accountable for responding to the community. Because it's not enough for you to be able to place that complaint, but you should be able to track that complaint through the process so that you know when it's being addressed.
Candidate 4.
Code enforcement is an issue that has been neglected in the city of St. Petersburg for the past 2 administrations. And we see that because there are so many residents who can point to 1 or 2 particular problem properties in their neighborhood, and there are significant fines that have been placed, liens placed on the property, but nothing's ever done about those liens. I have participated on the city's past codes enforcement task forces. In the late 80s and the 90s, we implemented changes in our ordinances to make it easier to find out-of-town landlords. The challenge is we don't have an administration that's committed to good code enforcement, and it shows. And I'm committed to the city of St. Petersburg that I understand this issue. I've been one of those folks who's called in on problem properties in a neighborhood association. I know what we need to do in order to get good compliance, and I'm committed to doing that. It's time for a change.
Candidate Foster.
The codes has come a long way, and they utilize technology, and they are adequately managing a very heavy caseload, admittedly so. But when it comes to liens on the property of people that can ill afford to pay their liens or ill afford to even maintain their property, I think we have to go a step further. We're utilizing the N team for those that have hit financial straits that can't bring their properties up to code, and the N team goes out and they'll actually help bring the property up to code. Parish projects, community service projects, we're seeing that abound throughout the city. So how can we help your neighbor bring their property up to code? We're doing that. Yes, things get tied up in the lane system, and people seem to take things to court, and yes, they're bogged down in the court systems. I was at Coquina Key today, meeting with my codes director, the assistant director, and a property owner that right across the street they've had repeated code issues with tens of thousands of dollars of liens. We're going to step that one up a notch and take legal action to go after that.
Candidate Gates.
All of these candidates are right. I'll keep my answer short. The code department, it must be reformed. It has to be reformed. Accountability is another big issue. We have to really enforce these policies that are in place. As far as not so beautiful property, the enforcement and coding has to be really enforced on that. I lost my train of thought.
Well, we'll give you another
We also
question.
have to get, one thing that I did notice when I spoke with the elderly lady over in the Childs Park region, an issue that she faced was on her back property, there's an alleyway, and she got fined for that first 3 feet on her back alleyway. That's not her property. It's the city's property, and because she wasn't educated on that, she was, of course, fined time after time for that. And we just have to really enforce that and reform our code enforcement departments.
Candidate Gates. What can you do as mayor to bring more fans to the Trop to keep the Rays in St. Petersburg?
Where do I start? We have to really, I love the Rays. I will start off by saying that. We have to really work together, the city and the Rays. We have to bring the knowledge to the people that we have our own MLB team right in our backyards. Let's show them support and they show us support, because in the end, when these games start selling out, they bring economic growth to our downtown district. Also, we have to pretty much, I would say, have days where that the players and the owners of the Rays come out into the community and actually meet the young men and women who aspire on being one day a sports player, something of that nature, but we have to work hand in hand and get that out.
Candidate Foster.
You know, the role of the mayor is to be the CEO of the fourth largest city of the state. It's to oversee the day-to-day operations of the city, from police, fire, water resources, parks and recreation. It's not to be the marketing director for the Tampa Bay Rays. Now, that being said, it is to be the chief cheerleader for their Major League Baseball team, and to make sure that we support, whether it's co-marketing, whether it's having the Rays opening day celebration by closing part of Central Avenue. It's by making sure that people feel engaged. It's making sure that we work on transportation components that can bring more fans to the stadium. It's making sure that we have these environments for public investment, for private investment. Over 850 new housing units, all new Rays fans that can buy a ticket. But at the end of the day, it's up to the Rays to make sure that they market, to make sure they market their ticket prices and their concessions, to make sure that they have that environment so people will want to come. But we're working as a partner with the Tampa Bay Rays.
Candidate Ford.
I was a season ticket holder for the first 10 years. Our family shared 4 tickets with 3 other families, and we were season ticket holders, and we were also a suite owner for 10 years. So we had money in the game. We were fans, and I agree with Mr. Foster. It's a private business, and they're responsible for their marketing. I have to say, though, that it's a little bit hard to really want to jump right on in there and say, yay, rah, every time you turn around and the Rays seem to be backing away from the city of St. Pete. And I say that from a fan perspective. Well, gee, should I really make that corporate investment or that family investment if y'all are fixing to leave, as they would say in Texas, where I was for a while. And that's a concern that I have, is that there's been this perception that the Rays want to get out of town, and I think that has impacted their fan base, and that's not our fault. So I think certainly the mayor should be the cheerleader, and I can find some pom-poms for you, Mr. Mayor. But those are the sorts of things that mayors do. They are the cheerleaders for all the businesses in the city of St. Petersburg.
Candidate Craxton.
Thank you. And Mr. Foster is right, that it is a private business, but we have a lot of private businesses in the city of St. Petersburg, and it's our job to work with those businesses to try and help them be successful. And it's hard to work with a business when you're not communicating, and when you're talking about, we have a contract, we're not going to budge, we've got this contract in place, you're going to be here to 2027. That's not working as a partnership. It's all about communication. It's about working to raise the visibility in the community of the team. It's about working on public transportation to try and make it easier for people to get from Clearwater and from Hillsborough and Tampa and from Sarasota to come to the games, whether that's by light rail, it's by bus rapid transit, or by ferry. And it's about talking with them about how their pricing structure is so that fans can afford to go to the game. You have to work together to try and help your businesses in this community succeed, whether it's a small business or, in the case of the Rays, a large business.
Candidate Foster. If the lens is defeated, what would you as mayor do to prevent gridlock on the pier issue going forward?
Well, I've already done that. I'm already working on that. I assembled the 828 Alliance, which has pro-lens, anti-lens, marine scientists, people from the community, architects, and they're meeting now to do 2 things. One, to make sure that we have a unified voice together in the event the referendum fails. But in the event the referendum passes and the lens contract is voided, then we're going to take advantage of this summer, we're going to take advantage of all this passion, this momentum, to make sure that we have a process in place on August 28th for the design and selection of a new pier. Because I think having no pier is not an option. Having no pier for a long period of time is not an option. So we need to make sure that, again, we take advantage of everybody's interest and everyone at the table with their passion, with their ideas, to make sure that there is a process in place, strictly a process in place so we can move forward, starting with the Pier Visioning Task Force. So we start there so we're not reinventing the wheel, but we're starting to work on the new St. Petersburg Pier.
Candidate Ford.
Thank you. Wow. It's amazing that the same solution that got us to this point is being proposed by Mr. Foster, and I heard actually Mr. Kreisman make the same suggestion. I think the citizens of St. Pete need to vote and approve of whatever is put on their waterfront. Perhaps on October 27th, the lens will pass, but I suspect that a majority of the folks will vote yes to terminate the malt sand contract. My suggestion would be that we find out what folks want to do with the inverted pyramid. And over a year ago, I suggested we put all the choices, back then we had the eye, the lens, whatever, put them all up and get a vote. We have an expert opinion from an architect who has said that the existing inverted pyramid and its caissons, which are all structurally sound, are worth $35 million. I think we need to ask the citizens of St. Pete, do you want to get rid of this $35 million asset? That's what the appeal is about. It is important, and to think that we have lost 28 businesses out of the pier and over 400 folks lost their job is just unconscionable in this recession. I think we should have a vote on the pier.
Candidate Kreisman.
I think one of the reasons that we find ourselves in this gridlock is that there really wasn't leadership from administration moving forward once a selection of the design was made. I was the first candidate to not only say, that I didn't support the lens, but rather than just being against something, I proposed how we move forward and put a timetable in place to have this thing built and on our waterfront by 2015. But really the critical aspect of this, in my opinion, is in order to move forward and get buy-in from the public, is for us to decide first, what do we want this pier, what do we want our waterfront pier to do? How do we want it to function? And then once we decide how we want it to function, then we decide what it's going to look like, and you build the structure around the function. We hear people talk a lot about the Sydney Opera House and how it's such an iconic structure. It is, but it's an opera house first. Then they build the iconic structure around it. We need to decide what we want it to do, then we can decide what it's going to look like.
Candidate Case.
Yes, whichever of the two candidates that does make it out of this primary, we should, or whichever two they are, should work with the current mayor and his 828 alliance as far as deciding on what structure would be there once the referendum is struck down. Now, what we need to do is the people would and need to be involved on what they would decide to put there. And what is there, it must be an infrastructure that is self-sustaining. It must not only attract citizens in St. Petersburg, it must be an infrastructure that attracts citizens all around the world, because this is our waterfront. Well, it sits on our waterfront, and this infrastructure needs to be a great representation so that it will be magnificent for years on, long after 30 years.
Candidate Ford. If elected, will you support universal curbside recycling, and why or why not?
I helped initiate the first curbside recycling program in Old Northeast back in the late 90s. We had this program for 10 years, and we found out that Mayor Fisher had been accepting the grant money, had been picking up the stuff, but rather than taking it to a recycling company, because that company had gone out of business, instead they took it to the dump. Now that was really, really disheartening, I have to tell you. I had folks coming from this neighborhood and bringing their stuff to our bins. I think we need to look at a test sample first and see how that works. As many of you know, we have recycling. What we don't have is curbside recycling sponsored by the city. There's private curbside recycling if folks want it. I think we've got to figure out how to get it done. And part of that is education, but part of it also is coming up with the right combination of what time during the month would we have recycling. Florida is a little bit different from the other communities that have recycling in that we have bugs and other critters that we have to be careful of when we're putting stuff out at the curb. So I'm committed to curbside recycling.
Candidate Kreisman.
I do support universal curbside recycling. I think it's kind of amazing that we have this reputation of being a green community, but yet we are one of the few large cities in the state of Florida that doesn't have universal curbside recycling. I think if we're truly going to wear that title proudly, we need to meet this element of that. and bring curbside, universal curbside to the community. I think we certainly ought to be looking at potentially, if possible, a single stream, because that would make it certainly a lot easier. But it's critical that we do this. It's time.
I would support curbside recycling, and I do with candidate Kreisman. Recycling it's fun to me. I think this is something that our youth and children would enjoy. When I'm with my daughter, who's 2 years old, she enjoys digging through the garbage and getting plastic and paper things. She really enjoys that. This is something that I'm more than confident that any child would enjoy, and this would, of course, educate them, and this would be something positive that would move St. Petersburg forward and living up to their name being one of the nation's top green cities. So I do support universal curbside recycling.
Candidate Foster.
Universal curbside recycling means that whether you recycle or not, you're going to get a bill for it. You're going to pay for it, it'll be on your sanitation bill. So I support subscription-based curbside recycling, which is something I implemented not long after I became mayor. We've had 2 contracts. The first contract at roughly $3 a month it was dirt cheap, and we didn't have near the subscribers that they needed to sustain itself. So we have another contract with another company. So those that want to recycle can actually have it picked up at curbside. But with so much alleyway, trash removal, with street parking and things like that, it makes it very difficult. Not insurmountable, but difficult and expensive. So as long as there's a high cost involved in that, I won't support universal curbside recycling. But we're looking at ways to make it more affordable. And if we can get that cost down, and as we convert our sanitation fleet to compressed natural gas, which is a lot more efficient, there might come a time when the cost is so low, it's a no-brainer. We're working on it.
I am informed this will be the last question before we go into closing arguments or closing statements. Candidate Kreisman, how would you work to ensure trust and confidence in the mayor's office?
Oh, that's a great question. It's really about just being honest with the public and having an open dialogue, being transparent. One of the things that I'm really proud of during my time that I served on council was putting a process in place to try and make us more transparent and accessible to the public by allowing you, the public, to be able to have access to watch council meetings online, streaming real time, to be able to go back and instead of having to sit and watch the entire meeting trying to find that one issue you were interested in, being able just to click on that agenda item and just watch that one item, that one that you were interested in. It's something that I've done my whole career in 12 years of public service. Used to have every vote that I ever cast, both in the House and in City Council, available for the public, because I believe that it's your right to know where we stand on the issues. But it's all about being honest and having communication.
Candidate Ford.
I think restoring trust and confidence in the mayor's office is really important. And as a registered nurse, I'm a registered nurse and somebody who's used to working with people, I understand how important those relationships are and how you need that honesty in order to really develop good problem solving. Unless you trust each other, unless you're honest, and you treat everybody with respect, you're not going to be able to move forward. And joking and playing games, I just don't think is appropriate from your elected officials. And I think that's a real clear indication of how some folks approach this particular job. It is important that we are always communicating with our citizenry in an open and honest manner, and that if there are problems, that we tackle them immediately and we just don't sweep them under the rug. And I am committed to restoring trust and confidence in the mayor's office.
Candidate Foster.
Well, I've been serving you since 1998, first on the city council and then as your mayor. It's been an honor. And I have a record, and I want you to judge me accordingly on my record. But do your homework, do your research. There are two other candidates up here that also have a record of service. Judge them on their record as well. But as far as truth and honesty in the mayor's office, I've been open, accessible. You can ask me anything and you'll get a straight answer. From breakfast with the mayor, and hopefully many of you have come out to breakfast with the mayor or mayor's night out where we bring City Hall out to you in your district, to appointments with me. I'm probably the only large city mayor in the entire state that routinely gives out his cell phone number, 410-0154. Again, 410-0154. If you read something in the newspaper and you go, the mayor's bumped his head, call me. If you read something that you think is contradictory to something I said before, call me. Send me a message. I'm probably the most accessible mayor you've ever had.
Candidate Cates.
I didn't mean to laugh at what the current mayor just said. All the debates that I've been to with the current mayor, he taunts his record as if it's not flawed. If his record was so perfect, there would be a much larger margin in the polls of him leading. But he's right. Judge him for his record. How I would restore hope and confidence in City Hall. I'm one of the most personable guys that anyone would ever meet. Time after time, my personal cell phone number is out. I have nothing to hide. I'm a 23-year-old citizen of St. Petersburg who's negative $19,000 in the hole. I have nothing to hide. This is me in raw. Yeah, this is me in raw form. I love the city of St. Petersburg. I do know I'm supposed to stop, but we have to restore hope with the people. The people constantly have to be involved in our city, community involvement. I'll stop now, but I would love to talk with you after the forum.
We will now go into closing remarks, which each candidate will have a minute and a half. We'll start in the order in which they have drawn to proceed, and we ask everyone to please hold your applause until all the candidates have made their closing remarks. Candidate Cates.
Back to me. I am Anthony Cates. Throughout my life, I've learned a lot in my young 23 years. Upon me graduating high school in 2008, I moved to Gainesville, where my sister owned a Sunoco gas station, where I managed for 2.5 years, working 20-hour days to have our business thrive as a family. My purpose for running for mayor, of course, politics was my first passion, and I constantly say that I am not a politician. That's something that I'm not. I would like to be considered as a public figure, and community involvement involving the people, giving everybody the same equal playing field. That's something that I will promote, that I have promoted since day one of me being brought in this world. I shot educational DVD on the U.S. Constitution with the Sixth Circuit Court Judge, Greg Demers. My vision for St. Petersburg is, of course, prosperity. We must be fiscally conservative. Education is a big thing. Public safety, homelessness, issues like this. This is what we must tackle. Yes, the pier and the raise, we have to tackle that because that's in our city. But the issues that we must really focus on are the real issues that we face as a city, and those issues that are plaguing us as a people. Because at the end of the day, we're human, not black, not white. We're not Republicans or Democrats.
Thank you, Candidate Cates. Candidate Foster.
Thank you, Mr. Dillinger, for doing such a fine job, and thank you all to Northeast Park for hosting this and for your attention tonight. 4 years ago, I was probably in this very room making commitments and promises to navigate the city through the worst recession, and to make sure that we right-size government, make sure that we were good stewards of your money, and make sure to oversee public safety, economic development, and job creation. And I'm happy to report that we're doing very well. The state of your city is doing very well. We focused on arts, on culture, and creating quality spaces, and we have a wonderful city. Like I said earlier, we're on track for almost $500 million in new construction in the city of St. Petersburg. We created jobs. So there's a lot more at stake than certain things that we banter about, but the state of your city is good. You should be very proud of the city of St. Petersburg. You know, my role as mayor has been to oversee the day-to-day operations of the fourth largest city in the state of Florida, to be the CEO of 2,700 employees, and to be a good steward of your money, all the while trying to manage hundreds of millions of dollars as a steward. And we're doing very well. You know, it's been an honor to be your mayor. I will focus in the next 4 years on economic development, job creation, education. But I will say now is not a good time for on-the-job training. You've invested 3.5 years in me, and I can tell you that no other candidate has the executive experience that I have to lead this city for the next 4 years. And I would appreciate your support on August 27th. God bless you.
Candidate Ford.
Thank you, and I'd like to thank the League of Women Voters in Northeast Park for inviting us here this evening to chat a little bit about our vision for the city. And I love the city of St. Petersburg. It's been real interesting for me to see the programs that I began way back in the late 80s and early 90s, how they're coming to fruition. By the same token, though, I have seen some slippage. And yes, it's a great city, and isn't that downtown waterfront district just amazing? When I think back to those visioning workshops that I participated in the year 2000, we were talking about cafes, and we want it to be kind of like Paris. It's so neat to see that come to fruition, to look and see what's going on 4th Street with that commercial district so vibrant. And it didn't start that way, though. It took some significant volunteer effort and working in a coordinated fashion with city officials in order to put those plans into place. But I have to tell you, I've seen some slippage. I think we need to restore our commitment to our neighborhoods, to our neighborhood partnership program. We definitely have to take this further and help all of our business districts. That not all business districts are the same, and I think we need to absolutely look at that. And I do, though, applaud the mayor on the 34th Street South initiative. That's well past its due time. We have to reinforce our commitment to our children, especially in preschool care. We have to make sure our kids are ready. And I think we have to really look at our budget and make sure that aligns with the values that we hold dear. I ask for your vote on August 27th. That's KathleenFord.com.
Candidate Christ.
Thank you, Mr. Dillinger. My name is Rick Kreisman, and it was an honor for me to serve for 6 years as a city councilman. And for the last 6 years, I served in the Florida House of Representatives trying to fight for some common sense solutions in a place where common sense wasn't often found. After spending 6 years, I wanted to come back to a place where people and policy mattered again, and partisanship wasn't important, and that's really what local government's about, but more importantly, that's what St. Petersburg is about. I served for 6 years with Rick Baker, who was a Republican, I was a Democrat. We had differences, but those differences didn't stop us from moving our city forward because we cared about moving the city forward. We cared about ideas. We cared about policies that brought economic development to our community, that improved public schools and made our neighborhoods vibrant. And the job of the mayor isn't just to maintain the status quo, and we heard Mr. Foster roll out a number of initiatives tonight that he's talked about, and I'm glad he's doing that. But it's been 3.5 years, and every year is not an election year. It's also not about just pointing out what's wrong. It's about being proactive and innovative. It's about listening, learning, and leading, and it's about being somebody who can unite people and bring the community back together. That's what leadership is, and that's how we're going to move this city forward. And it's exciting. We've got a great city, but I'm so excited about what the future of the city can be, what we can become if we work together as a community to move forward. I look forward to your vote on August 27th.
Well, let's do all of that. On behalf of the League of Women Voters, we want to thank you for your attendance tonight. You were very professional. great decorum here tonight. And if anybody is interested in membership in the league, please go to the back of the room. And again, everybody travel home safely. Thank you.